Hello and welcome to Justin Dwyer Artistry. Today we're doing a tutorial on how to paint an autumn landscape in oil paint. This is going to be the first part of a two-part series, so I can show you a little bit more clearly how I do the work and you can follow along with me. So just like the tree said, don't leave me, stick around and check out this tutorial. Let's get cracking! Now here's a quick look at what the finished painting is going to look like. For the next 8 minutes I'm going to show you how to paint the background. The colours I'm using for this painting are burnt umber, yellow ochre, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, cadmium red, alizarin crimson and titanium white. I'll add some other colours in as the painting develops later. I start out with a very thin mixture of cerulean blue and titanium white with just a touch of ultramarine blue in it. At this stage I'm just looking to block in the main shapes of the sky and get the main areas in the landscape defined. There's no need for finesse in this stage because I'm going to cover all of this with further coats of paint later on. Using a mixture of ultramarine blue and burnt umber, I start marking in some of the darker areas that I can see in my painting. These aren't reflecting the true colours at this stage, I'm just looking to get in some lights and some darks to help me find my way as I place the objects in the painting. I add some diluted yellow ochre into the mix and blend it in with the other colours. This will put some of the lighter areas in. I'm thinning my paint down with turpentine here. I want a very thin layer of paint that will dry quickly. I keep pushing the paint around the canvas with a big brush, just defining the areas, looking for the different gradients in the colours and the tones. You can see how thin my paint is by how much it's running down the canvas. This allows me to push the paint around and move it to where I want it. If I put something in a place I don't like, I can very easily just wipe it off with a rag at this stage. I'm painting in some distant hillsides. I'm marking out some areas where there are trees and some areas where there are fields. To get the greens I'm mixing some ultramarine blue, some burnt umber and a little bit of the yellow ochre. As I said before, there's no precision required at this step. I'm really just looking to mark out the different areas and find where everything is in my composition. I completed this painting over 9 separate sessions, allowing it to dry in between each one. The colours are the same in my second session except that I've added in some cadmium yellow. I mix a lot of titanium white with a very small amount of ultramarine blue and start to paint in a cloud shape that I can see in the middle of the painting. One of the things that really drew me to this scene in the first place was the vivid blue sky in the background. I will take my time to build up the sky in several layers, mixing in various amounts of ultramarine blue and cerulean blue in with titanium white before I can find exactly the mixture that I'm looking for. Since the sky makes up about 50% of the whole surface area of this painting, I want to make sure that it really has a good impact. One thing I've learnt over the years is that every single time I rush the sky at the beginning, I always end up coming back and having to repaint it later on anyway. I use more ultramarine blue at the top of the sky to make it darker and more cerulean blue at the bottom of the sky to make it a little bit greener. This will bring the bottom of the sky forward, but I'll counter that by adding more white, which will push it back. By the way, what does hold the sun up in the sky? Sunbeams! The sky is still not quite where I want it, but I'm going to leave it for now and let it dry and come back in another session. I start working on the hillside using a brownish green colour that I've mixed using burnt umber, yellow ochre, titanium white and ultramarine blue. I will build these layers of trees up in different stages, putting down some darker areas, then coming back in with some lighter areas, then possibly coming back in with some shadows at the end. The further back the trees are, the more blue and white they will have in them. They will almost look like a faded grey. Colours further forward will tend to have more yellow in them and will be a little bit sharper. Using the colours in this way helps me build up depth in my painting so that I can push things further forwards, further backwards or keep them in the middle. I'm very interested in watching how different spaces change in different lights, how things will move forwards and backwards as light is added or taken away. This particular scene was a crisp autumn day with very little haze in the air, but still distance will fade the background just a tiny bit. Using cadmium yellow, titanium white, a tiny bit of cerulean blue and a tiny bit of burnt umber, I'm mixing up some greens to put in some of the distant fields. These colours are mixed using more white than anything else. If I make them too bright, they will push forward and give me problems later on in getting the composition to balance. I'm using a reference for this painting. It was a photograph that I took on the side of the road as I was going for a drive one day. For these kind of paintings, I like to print the photo out in an A4 size so that I can see things very clearly. Then as I'm mixing the colours, I can actually hold the brush up against the photograph and compare the colours that I'm mixing with the colours that are really there. It doesn't mean I always copy the colours exactly. I will change the colours to suit myself if I feel like it will add to the painting. But it's a very good way for a beginner to be able to judge the colours in their painting. I mixed some cadmium red, cadmium yellow and a lot of titanium white to make a very pale pinkish orange colour. I add a few strokes of this to the grass in the foreground, which will help me later. And I use that colour to paint in some roofs that I can see in the midground, just to add some detail. I was going to mow my grass this morning instead of making this video, but I just couldn't get myself motivated. In session 3 I add some more paint to my palette. I've added a titanium yellow and a mid-leaf green just to complete the ensemble. I notice that the ferrule on the brush I want to use is a little bit detached. I give it a good hard squeeze just to reconnect it. If you don't have a strong enough hand to do this, you can also use some pliers or give it a tap with a hammer. Some of these brushes I bought in the 1990s and I'm still using them today. If you clean your brushes regularly and look after them, they'll last you for a very long time. Due to some focus issues I lost a little bit of footage, but you can see on the left hand side I've added some distant hills which I've made using more ultramarine blue with a lot of white and a little bit of burnt umber. I'm pushing more detail into the tree lines now, adding shadows along the bottom of the closer tree lines which will help to bring them forward. Every time we sharpen something up or make it a little bit clearer, it comes forward. I'm using more ultramarine blue to make these shadows in with the burnt umber and the yellow ochre that I was already using. Using titanium yellow, cerulean blue and titanium white, I've mixed in some greener areas of field in the midground that you can see pushing forward. Adding more cadmium yellow and cerulean blue to that mix, I've mixed in some midground trees of a brighter green. I'm mixing brighter colours now, but I don't want to get them too bright or they will come too far forward and we won't be able to balance the painting. I need to add some more layers in the sky. I feel like the sky is too bright, so I want to push a lot of white into the bottom of the sky. This won't be the last time I touch it. Then I'll start building up a little bit of the clouds in the middle as well. I mix some strong shadows for the trees in the midground. The trees at the very front, I'm adding a lot of burnt umber to bring them forward. Burnt umber is like a dark yellow, so it will come forward in the painting when I use a lot of it. In the background I'll use more ultramarine blue. We're still going to add more shadows and details just to get a little bit more variation across all of the range of the trees. Finally, I'm going to add in some tree lines that have been missing around the edges of some paddocks that are rising up on the sides of the hills. These tree lines are a great way to get some diagonals into my painting, which will give my painting a little bit more energy. I have a large landmass on one side, fading down to distant hills in the bottom left, and these tree lines will lead us up to the top of the hill. They will form a bridge between the dark trees at the top of the hill, the red house in the middle of the painting, and the strong orange tree that we're going to paint in part 2. This is adding unity to the painting by giving the viewer a road to travel along by following the tree lines between the different strong focal points of the painting. I use a lot of different brushes when I'm painting these paintings. Often I'll start out with very large flat or filbert brushes. Then later in the painting, as we move down into smaller details, I'll use an array of flat, filbert, round and even rigger brushes, sometimes even a liner brush. These small rigger brushes are great for pushing in little bits of detail when I don't want to have great splodges of paint. Why did the paintbrush see the doctor? It had a stroke. To help me build up these different layers of detail in between drying, I'm using a medium in my painting. In this particular occasion I'm using a medium called liquid. I just want to push more white into the bottom of the sky and get the top of the sky a little bit darker. So I just work on building up the final layer of the sky and then building in some of the clouds that I was missing. I need to get it right this time because in the next session I'm going to paint it over the top of it and there won't be another good opportunity to change the sky again. And that's it for part 1. Thank you very much for watching. Leave me a comment below and let me know what you think and whether you'd like to see more of these type of videos. Don't forget, in part 2 we're going to come back to this and we're going to paint a tree in the foreground and tighten up with a lot of details. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and bye bye.